Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, so thank you for joining us today. Next slide, please, Dante. We can kind of take a look at our agenda for today. Before we jump in, we're just going to make sure everybody can hear us. We're all set. We will have a Q&A session at the end. And any questions you may have, we'll have time for that as well as we get through our webinar today. Next slide, please. All right, so good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us on behalf of the Arizona Economic Opportunity and the Governor's Workforce Arizona Council. Welcome to today's Workforce Pell State Certification Application Overview. And today's webinar is designed to prepare eligible institutions to successfully complete Arizona Workforce Pell certification application. So our goal is to explain not only what information is required, but why it is required, and how Arizona will evaluate applications, and how institutions can avoid common issues that delay the review process. So before we begin the application demonstration, we'd like to address some of the questions that we've received or have seen posted to other states with an application available. Much of the information is also available on our Workforce Pell Frequently Asked Questions section within our Workforce Pell website. But today's webinar provides additional context before you begin that application. Next slide, please. Okay, so first, it is important to understand that Arizona's role is to conduct the governor's certification. Okay, and I do apologize, let me back up a little bit. My name is Janice Garza. I am the Workforce Arizona Council Policy Manager, and I will be getting us started on, again, just understanding the state certification this morning. I do apologize. So thank you again for joining us. So as we look at understanding the state certification, it is first important to understand that Arizona's role is to conduct the governor's certification, which is required under the federal Workforce Pell program. So a state certification is the first step in the required approval process, and programs receiving Arizona certification must still be submitted and approved by the U.S. Department of Education before they become designated as a Workforce Pell program. So a separate application is required for every Workforce Pell training program seeking a certification, and the certification applies to individual programs, not institutions. So each program must independently demonstrate that it satisfies all applicable eligibility requirements. So throughout today's presentation, you'll notice that Arizona requests detailed information regarding employer engagement, labor market alignment, curriculum, credentials, student outcomes, and consumer information. These requests are intentional. Workforce Pell is an evidence-based federal program, and Arizona is responsible for independently validating that each recommended program meets state and federal requirements before it can be certified. Next slide, please. Okay, so we would also like to address, why student level information is required within today's webinar. And so student records do allow the state of Arizona to independently verify completion rates, employment outcomes, and required performance measures using authorized administrative wage records as required by the federal program. So this validation process ensures that certification decisions are based on consistent, objective, and independently verified information. And your student information is used solely for Workforce Pell certification purposes. It will be protected through secure data sharing and privacy requirements, and it is not acceptable by email. So all student level records must be submitted through the secure SFTP portal, which is assigned to your institution. More information will be provided during the demonstration. Next slide, please. So another common question is whether the online application saves your progress. It does not save your progress. So for this reason, we strongly encourage every applicant to complete the Phase 1 preparation workbook before opening the online application. Having all of your required documentation assembled in advance will significantly reduce the time needed to complete the application and help avoid any incomplete submissions. So we also understand that, institutions ask, what causes or what could cause applications for state certification to be delayed. So the most common reasons include missing documentation, incomplete responses, inconsistent information between supporting materials in the application, insufficient employer validation, inadequate labor market documentation, or just a failure to submit the required student level records. So today's webinar is intended to help you avoid those issues before you submit your application. Next slide, please. Okay, so finally, many applicants also ask, what happens after the submission? So following the application deadline, the state will review each submission, validate the required information, and may request clarification or additional documentation when necessary. Once the review is complete, eligible programs will be presented for state certification through the Workforce Arizona Council. Programs receiving a certification may then proceed to the U.S. Department of Education for federal review and approval. So with that overview in mind, during the next portion of today's webinar, first we'll review each application section, explain the purpose of every question, discuss the documentation you'll need to provide, and we'll conclude with the detailed walkthrough of the phase 2 student level data submission process. At the end of today's webinar, we will have Patrick, who will help us summarize the complete review timeline and discuss what applicants should expect after the submission, and explain the state review process and identify important milestones leading to the state certification. We will answer as many questions as time allows and follow up on any questions we do not get to. So now let me turn it over to Ferris, who can begin walking through the application itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. I'm going to open up my screen here. All right, I think we're in business. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. My name is Ferris Ramadan. I'm the program director for the State Longitudinal Data System. We call this the Integrated Data System. It's a separate platform, which we won't touch on today, but something that we've developed, as Janice touched on, is the actual application process to support the evaluation for Workforce Pell eligibility. So what I'm going to be doing over the next 20 minutes or so is walking through the exact step-by-step process for how people can actually apply. What I'm showing here on screen is our website, which is actually going to be the hub and where you're going to live for the next few weeks as you're putting together your application. This includes a lot of the information that Janice already explained, including an FAQ section at the bottom. But then what you'll be able to find here is the actual steps for applying to Workforce Pell. At a very high level, there's really two phases to this process. The first is phase 1, where we're collecting program level information. And then the second phase is going to be the collection of student level data. And given the sensitivity of these records, we have a separate portal that's secure where we're able to collect these records. Now, before actually applying, we want to make this as smooth as possible for folks. And so we have what is basically a downloadable workbook that will allow you to screen the questions in the phase 1 application up front. I'll go ahead and jump to that. So I've clicked on this link, and then here's what it looks like in practice. Again, you guys could follow along at home to basically do the exact same thing that I'm doing here. The first thing that you'll see is basically an introduction cover sheet, includes the purpose, how to use the workbook, really a step-by-step process to eliminate any ambiguity around what the process looks like. When I zoom out here a little bit, you'll be able to see that this is the first sheet of instructions, and then the phase 1 application itself includes all of the questions that you're actually going to see through our survey portal. And so this is broken down into our sections, the different questions, the format that's going to be expected, and then some supplemental information to contextualize what we're looking for. This final column here in column E is going to be our institutional or your institutional response. Again, you're going to be downloading this, you're going to be putting in your specific information, and you're going to have this on file. So when you're going through the application itself, it's available. I want to reiterate that this is not the submission itself. This is purely to help y'all organize your thoughts because there's a lot of information on here. So I'll do kind of a dry run here of what this would look like. My institution, let's say, is going to be something called Cactus College. We're located in Gavi, Arizona. And my OPID number is 1234567 8, right? You go on and on like this. And why that's important is because you'll see some of these later questions are going to require some digging. So there's going to be some uploads required, some narratives required, so on and so forth. What we have here for this demonstration today is a completed application. So on the right-hand side, you'll see all of the various institutional responses from what the actual institution looks like to the different files that I've collected up front and so on and so forth. Now, once this is done and complete, I can go on to the final stage of this, which is going to be the actual submission of these individual level records. Here on screen is, again, a breakdown of what this portal is. It's going to reiterate that we encourage folks to use that initial workbook to organize their thoughts and collect all the documentation that will be required for this submission. And then again, we encourage folks to reach out to our team, workforcepell@oeo.az.gov, if they have any challenges or questions around the application process. Moving into this first page, you'll see this is a one-to-one with that workbook that we were working on before. And so I'll just start plugging and playing with this information. I've already submitted this before, so some of this is already populated in here, but for you guys, you're going to be writing it out in real time. So Cactus College in Agave, Arizona. Here's an OPID number. Accreditation agency is, in this case, Higher Learning Commission, because I'm going to be a post-secondary college in this example. I'll say my name is John Smith, and then my role is a coordinator in this example. I'll write out my email. We'll say john.smith@cactus.edu. Here is a phone number, 520-123-4567, and then public community college. And then we start getting into some of the logic-based questions. So I'll pause here because we really want to make, we really want to protect people's time. And so the way that we've made this application submission is to include some survey-based logic. So we really encourage institutions to read through the questions really carefully, because if you answer in the negative to some of these, that means upfront we know that you're not going to be eligible for Workforce Pell, and then the survey will take you to the end. So in this case, I'm going to note that my institution has not been subject to a Title IV limitation, that we do have a Title IV participation agreement, and that we are in good standing with the U.S. Department of Education. Again, if I answered in the negative to a few of these, I'm going to be taken to the end, so please be sure to read questions carefully. Moving forward, now that I've passed kind of that initial check, I'll start uploading documentation that will be required for the Council and Office of Economic Opportunity to actually evaluate. So I'm going to upload this file here. This is just available in a folder on my local desktop. And then for the purpose of example, I'm calling this file 1. So that's uploaded and available. I'm also going to verify my good standing, and this is going to be called file 2. And you'll note that these are denoted in an asterisk, which means that they're a required question, and you will not be able to move forward through the survey unless you complete them. In this case, I don't actually have a Title IV limitation. And so what I'll be able to do is skip that question, but then I am just going to note for the sake of the reviewer that the Title IV suspension is not applicable. And I'll move forward. Okay, so I've completed that first page, which is talking about institutional level information, but now I need to talk about the actual program that I'm applying for Workforce Pell eligibility. One important thing to note here is that the survey is just designed to ingest one program at a time. So that means that I will be submitting potentially multiple surveys with multiple associated workbooks that I've prepared if there are different programs that I'm applying for eligibility. And so in this case, I'm saying the one program I'm applying for eligibility is a residential wiring certificate. I'm going to pre-specify the SIP that's associated. There's a space where you can add in other SIPs, and then we encourage folks to go to this link here if they're not familiar with what that code looks like for their program. Then we have to identify the associated occupation codes or SOCs that are associated with that program. So in this case, I know up front there are 4 occupations that I have crosswalked against my SIPs, right? My program level codes. I'm going to specify that or that program participants are going to receive a certificate at exit. This is an in-person delivery. And then there's now a series of additional logic-based questions, which are going to remove you from the survey if we determine eligibility, you're not eligible upfront, or allow you to proceed if you meet these minimum criteria. So in this case, at least 75% of my program is administered by the institution. The program has been offered for at least a year. It is based in Arizona. It meets the clock hours, which means that the program needs to range from 150 to 600 hours or 8 to 15 weeks. And then I also have a map, a course sequence, and a catalog description available. And then finally on this page, does my program lead to a recognized post-secondary credential? Here are some various examples of what those credentials would be. And I'm going to say yes. And then at the close, I'm going to say some additional information for the reviewer, which that my program was paused from 2025 to 2026. Again, just to color the context for them so the reviewer really understands the nuances of my program. Moving on to Workforce Pell qualifications. I'm going to specify the exact credential that will be awarded on completion. In this case, it's a residential wiring certificate. The issuing entity is Western Electrical Contractors Association. And then I'm going to talk about the program start date and when the program was first offered. So at the start, or excuse me, the next program start date will be later this year, which will be 09, 07, 2026 in this example. And then my program actually launched, let's say 3 years ago, which will be 01, 17, 2023 in this example. Moving forward, I'm required to provide a value recognition narrative. Again, this is reinforcing the need to use that workbook, or at least it will be helpful in this case. And I'll just go ahead and open this up so reviewers or people looking at this video later on can take a look at what kind of narrative we're looking for in this case. And then provide an actual upload of evidence that shows that the employers recognize the value of the credential. So going back up to upload the file, now I'm going to file number 3, and it's available. I'm going to provide a workforce needs alignment narrative. So once again, going into my workbook, copying and pasting that over, and then opening that up so people can look at that later. Moving forward, I'm going to provide evidence that the program results in at least one certificate or degree program. Here are examples of how you can articulate that. And then I'm going to once again provide evidence of that in my next file that I have available. You get the gist, right? So these follow-up questions are now going to be asking for evidence around portability, credential documentation, uploading the licensing authority documentation, industry validation, a curriculum map, a course sequence, and a catalog description. For the sake of time, I'm not going to click choose file and upload for each one of these, but reviewers will need each one of these in order to move forward with a successful review of your application. And then in this last required field here, I am specifying the URL where students or families can find consumer information. In this case, I have, again, that URL available in my workbook, and then I'm going to move forward with my submission. On this next page, I'm going to provide information on student success verification. And so the first piece of information I have here is the total tuition cost. And I'll say that was $2,500 for the course of that program. The fee, let's say, is $500. Book costs an estimated 250. Supplies, we'll say another 250. And then an estimated cost of for other costs will be zero. We sum all of this together, which will be in this case $3,500. And then I'm going to provide 5 participating employers, including 3 important pieces of information: the employer name, the point of contact, and then the relation to that program. So going into my workbook, I'm going to copy and paste this over. I'm going to open this up so people can pause and read that later. But you can see here those 2 employers with information that I have that is available for follow-up by the reviewers. I'm going to also upload employer advisory committee documentation and employer letters of support. Again, it's the exact same procedure on the last page. I upload a file, I'll go over here, and then boom, that file is available for submission. And then I'm going to describe now hiring commitments, preferred hiring relationships, or related employment connections. I'm going to go to my narrative or workbook here. I'm going to open it up. That narrative is now submitted and complete. I'm going to upload hiring commitments. I'm going to describe related internships, apprenticeships, or other learning opportunities. Here's an example of what that narrative would look like once again. I'm going to upload internship, clinical, or work-based learning information. And then finally, I'm going to provide employer validation notes, plug and play once again, open that up so people can review that narrative later. Moving forward, now I get into the last page of the submission. And this is also going to be the most challenging for institutions to submit because we're asking about student outcome data. So what we'll need to do here is actually talk about what the completion rate was for folks if folks were employed after exit. And we recognize that that kind of information is going to be challenging or impossible for some institutions to submit. So we've made some of these questions not required to close out the application, but please provide what you can because the Office of Economic Opportunity will be verifying what you submit in your phase 2 application for later. So to start, we set a recommended time frame by which we would like individuals to provide that student outcome data for between July 1, 23 to June 30th, 24. And so in this case, I'm going to say that I actually have additional data in my reporting period, starting with when my program was first initiated on January 17th, 2023, all the way up until my most recent cohort completion, which we'll say was 05-07, 2026. So about 3 years there for data that I will be submitting in these follow-up questions. Now, moving forward, then I basically will be taking that time frame and I'm going to be plugging in that information from my workbook to this sheet. So let's say for my example program, over that 3-year frame, that was 140 total participants. And then within that window, we had 119 program completers. Now, I'll be calculating my completion percentage, which is just taking the fraction of 119 over 140 divided by, or excuse me, multiplied by 100, which will be 85%. And then among those, we'll say that only 117 of the 119 received a credential. Now, for most programs or many of them, we suspect that those receiving a credential is going to be a one-to-one with the individuals who have completed a program. But if there are extenuating circumstances, we want to be able to track that. So in this case, we'll say there was 2 people that kind of fell through and didn't meet the criteria of getting a credential while they did complete the program. In that same breath, I will explain the credential attainment percentage, which will be that same ratio, 117 over 140 times 100. And then in this case, I've done some follow-up. So I know that 100 of my participants or students ended up being employed 2 quarters after exit. Again, that was specified in the narrative above. And so then that percentage is going to be then 84% because I'm dividing 100 over the total program completers, 119. Finally, I'm doing some investigation to look to see what my median quarterly earnings are. You'll be able to find that info through the Office of Economic Opportunity labor market information. And we have some supplemental resources to help respondents figure out what that should look like. And then for the licensure pass rate, in this case, I'm taking that those receiving a credential over the completers, which is that 117 over 119. And in this case, that would be a 98%. And then I'm just providing some additional outcome notes for the reviewers, explaining what I've done here, and that the actual number of individuals that I had follow-up information for was 30 participants. So that was kind of a statistical estimate of the number of people employed after exit. It wasn't a true count, and that's important for us to know. Moving forward, I'm now effectively done with the application, and this last page here is going to show off some consent. So you will be required to submit a phase 2 application, which I'll get into a second here. And this is consenting that you will, or your institution will be sharing these records with the Office of Economic Opportunity for the sole purposes of tracking and validating student outcomes. A certification that the information is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, certification that a notification will be provided to the state within 30 days of any material changes. And then finally, a certification that there is no conflict of interest. In this case, I will sign off with my fake person, John Smith, and I can move forward. And then you'll be prompted with this message that the state of Arizona will contact you with a phase 2 application step. I will now click next and I'm done. Okay, so I would say, over halfway done at this point. And now I'm going to hop back to the website. And to recap, what we've done here is we've basically completed our workbook, which is this prepare to apply section. And then we have completed the actual submission itself. Again, that was that link that we were just on. We went through and then plug and play with the information that we provided in the workbook. So now we're on step 2, which is going to be preparing our phase 2 application submission. This is, again, going to be a little bit different than that phase 1 because now we're dealing with sensitive student level information. And so what you'll be doing is, after review of this, is you can actually click open the spreadsheet. I'll jump over to that spreadsheet. And then you'll see at first glance, this looks pretty similar to what we've had before, where we have a set of instruction up front, going through line by line exactly what's required. I'm not going to read through this, but what y'all need to know is that this is going to be kind of like your home for where you're actually providing the information. So I'm going to be downloading the spreadsheet because, again, it's not going to be editable in Google Sheets. It's going to be edited on my local machine. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take a look at the fields here that I'll be collecting and then ultimately submitting to OEO. So this is a data dictionary on the second page here. And it's explaining basically the different variables that will be need to backfilling in, the definitions, the data type, the allowable format, and an example of what that would look like. Backing up here, I'll go to a submission template, and then this will be the actual sheet where I'm going to start collecting information from my institution that I will ultimately be submitting to OEO. Again, we'll be capturing this via SFT, which I'll show off in a second here. And I'll just go ahead and move forward to an example of what a completed sheet would look like. So again, this is now my completed sheet. I've filled this in with my institution's information, but I'm going to go through a couple of these columns here just to clarify what we're really looking for and tackle some frequently asked questions. So the first thing is our OPID. This is critical to match to the OPID that you submitted in the phase 1 application. And then also the institution name, we ask that you match this one as well. If there are multiple OPIDs you're submitting for, that's fine. But again, this is why it's valuable to have that workbook so you can make sure that what you're submitting can be connected by OEO. Moving forward, we do require SSNs as this is going to be a deterministic match that we execute. And so this column needs to be complete. There can't be any NAs here because we will not have the ability to match against employer records to complete our validation without this SSN alphanumeric identifier. Moving forward, we're also going to have a student first name and last name required for a validation on our end that we're talking about the same person with student middle name optional. And then we also have zip codes. So this zip code is something that should look familiar in that phase one application with our residential wiring certificate. But in this case, I'm actually going to be submitting two different programs to OEO, and you will be able to submit multiple programs for Workforce Pell eligibility evaluation within this phase two application. So you'll note here for my institution, Cactus College, I have additional codes here that is assigned to an HVAC service technician certificate, which I'm applying for Workforce Pell eligibility. So these two columns, again, are denoting program level specific information. I'm going to provide an institution program level code, which is basically going to be a unique code that your institution may have associated with that program. And then I'm going to move into the official start dates and related dates that are going to be required for us to validate one of the metrics, that completion rate, and then also to match this up against the employment timeline. So it's critical to submit all dates back at the data dictionary within that MMDD format. Starting with the official start date, this is just going to be the date at which the program participant was first slated to begin. If different, we have a student start date comment or column here. And so likely this will be the same between the two, but that's available if there's additional nuance that needs to be provided. And then we have an expected completion date. This is the parallel to the official start date, and then the actual completion date. So this actual completion date is one of the most sensitive columns here in that if a participant or student has not completed the program, they will need to be denoted here as an NA, a blank, right? And this is again all denoted or explained within that data dictionary. And so in this case, I have a participant who began their program but did not successfully complete. And so they're an NA, whereas this participant did begin their program and they did successfully complete. Now, there are instances where we understand there's going to be exclusion criteria, such as enlistment in military service or medical leave. And so you will be able to list those exclusion criteria in this final column here as numbers. And those numbers are specified as those different criteria within the data dictionary. Okay, so I've now done my phase two application. This is clean and ready to submit. While this was happening, the Office of Economic Opportunity will be reaching out to you via the email that you provided through the phase one application. And in that email, they're going to give you three pieces of information. The first is going to be a link to a file share SFTP, a username, and then a password. And what that link will take you to is this page right here. So as Janice touched on before, we will be collecting those student level records through this portal. And this is basically a secure way to provide these sensitive data directly to the state for the purposes of evaluating Workforce Pell eligibility. In this case, I have been given a login ID of OEO public user, and then I will plug in my password, which I have here, and then I'm going to go ahead and log in. This is going to look the same for everybody. So this is a bucket essentially that was given just to me that only my institution and the Office of Economic Opportunity have visibility to. So no one else will be able to see these data, and they will not be shared or used for any other purposes apart from supporting the eligibility evaluation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on upload. I will browse my files on my local machine. And then in this case, it was my phase two application, which I've completed. And I will click on done. And there it is. Phase two application is up and available for the state of Arizona to pull and process and match against employment level records. I'll go ahead and log out. And then my last step, once I've logged out, is going to be to actually reach out to the state via that Workforce Pell email that I mentioned earlier. Share this tab instead. And then I'll mention to them that, again, I have uploaded that phase two file, and then we're done. So once again, what we've done here is we did that phase one application where I submitted the info through that online portal using my workbook, and then phase two, where I put together the student level data to support the state's evaluation of my program. With that, I will stop sharing and I will turn it over to Dante for the next part of this webinar.
All right. Thank you, Ferris. Did a great job there. And just want to remind everybody that this will be recorded. I know that was a lot of information at you all at once. And so we will be posting this online and it will be available for folks. That was also answered in the Q&A. My name is Dante Mitchell. I'm the Chief Government and Community Liaison here at OEO, supporting Governor Office projects, Director's Office projects, including this Workforce Pell. We all know that this is a big opportunity for Arizona, and we're looking forward for a successful program. And we know this is, kind of early. This is new to a lot of us, and so as we continue to learn, take in information, we're going to make this program as best as we can and make improvements along the way. So I just wanted to quickly go over the application review timeline. So this is our initial timeline. It's a very compressed timeline because of how quickly this rollout is coming out. As this is also available on the OEO Workforce Pell website. So we started in July 1, which is when the federal program opened up. We had published a draft policy, opened it up for public comment until July 20th. On July 27th, this week, we were able to open the application. Today, we're holding this webinar to help better inform you of everything that will be expected in the process. On August 13th, the Workforce Arizona Council's Executive Committee will review that public comment and vote on a final draft policy. On August 24th, our application will close. And then between then and September 17th, we will be reviewing the eligibility in consultation with the Governor's Workforce Arizona Council. And then finally, well, hopefully by September 17th, the Workforce Arizona Council will review eligible program, vote on the final policy, and eligible programs will receive the governor's certification for submission to the U.S. Department of Education. And that's governor's certification is key for moving forward. Again, so now this is a very compressed timeline. I know for all of us, once we have the draft, the policy finalized, this first round complete, we do plan to improve the process for following years with the goal of applications being open twice a year for the following years. Other than that, I would like to introduce Patrick Brown, our Workforce Council Administrator. We still have a few more Q&A questions that we're going through. We're working through those as quickly as we can, we'll keep copies of this information to better inform our Q&A that's available on our website. Patrick.
All right, thank you, Dante. Good morning. I'm Patrick Brown, the Workforce Arizona Council Administrator. So, first of all, I want to just acknowledge that we got a lot of great questions in the Q&A, and I know folks from our team are currently either answering those at this moment, or if we're not able to quite get to your question in this setting, we'll definitely follow up with you outside of the webinar. But just to kind of close this out here, first of all, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your commitment to expanding access to in-demand workforce training opportunities for Arizona learners. As you prepare your application, we want to encourage you to definitely use the Workforce Pell webpage, the frequently asked questions that we prepare, and as well as the prepared workbook to kind of support your application process, and of course utilize those resources. And the big thing is, this is designed to help ensure that your applications are complete and ready for review. On behalf of the Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity and the Workforce Arizona Council, definitely want to thank you for your time and participation and partnership. And we look forward to working with you through the certification process and wish you success as you pursue state certification and ultimately federal Workforce Pell designation. Again, before we close out, we just want to again highlight our website. Of course, any questions or comments as you're going through this process, definitely reach out to us at our the email here. It's wfpel@oeo.az.gov. And again, if we don't quite get to your question this morning through the webinar, we'll definitely follow up with you as well. So again, thank you all. Have a good rest of your day, and thank you.